Hey everybody. So, since the news of the Xbox buying Activision Blizzard came through, a lot of people online have been saying a lot of things. Some of it perfectly sensible, but most of it frankly kind of insane, and I wanted to take this time to kind of respond to some of those takes. So, let's get into it. So, the first one I want to talk about is the question of whether or not this constitutes a monopoly. And I want to talk about that because, number one, it's the most prevalent thing I've been seeing in regards to this acquisition. And two, I also think it's kind of one of the more ridiculous takes because I feel like the only way that you could be saying that this is a monopoly is if you either want it to be so it doesn't happen, or if you just flat out don't understand what a monopoly is. And to be clear, if people are, I'm not talking about the people who are like, corporate consolidation is worrying, maybe we should look at this. That's fine, totally understandable. But the people who are like, this is a monopoly, like, and they're tweeting at President Joe Biden and being like, you need to step in and stop this, or like, please take a look at this, like, those people are insane. So, okay, let's talk about it. I did what I feel like most of the people online who have all of a sudden become lawyers for some reason did not do, and I actually looked up what constitutes a monopoly. I know, crazy to, look up things before you say them. It's, who would have thought? But here's the definition of a monopoly, right? A monopoly is a dominant position of the industry or a sector by one company to the point of excluding all other viable competitors. Okay, so having a monopoly is not the same thing as being in a leadership position, which, to be clear, even after this acquisition, Xbox is probably still not going to be in that leadership position. In fact, even after this acquisition, it's projected that they're going to be in third place in terms of gaming revenue behind Sony and Tencent. And Tencent is number one, which I feel like we should be talking about because I didn't know that, and I'm assuming most people didn't know that, because I feel like also most people don't even know what Tencent is. So the fact that they're number one in gaming revenue, maybe that's something we should be more concerned about than whether or not Xbox buys Activision Blizzard. Regardless, also, after this acquisition, they're only going to be representative of something like 11% of the market share. And that's, like, it's a lot for one company, but it's not anywhere near enough to be a monopoly. To be a monopoly, it has to be at least 50%, usually closer to 70, right? So let's just take a step back. This is not a monopoly. And I know that it's really easy to look at this and be like, they just bought World of Warcraft and Call of Duty and Candy Crush and like all of these games that like my mom knows about when she barely knows anything about the games industry. It's really easy to see that and like get kind of scared. But I feel like if we all just take a step back and look at the bigger picture of what this is, then it's not as much as we actually think it is, right? Which brings me to, I guess it's still kind of part of the same monopoly conversation, but there's been a lot of people on the other side, on the Xbox side of things, being like, Nintendo and PlayStation are dead, right? Like, oh man, if this acquisition goes through, like Xbox number one, PlayStation and Nintendo can't do nothing, right? And it's like, okay, if that were true, then that would be a monopoly, but it's not, so it's not. Like, here's the thing. Think about all of the IP that Activision Blizzard owns. Most of those IP exist exclusively on PC, meaning that those IP, if anything, will go to more places than they go currently. I'm talking about things like World of Warcraft might get a console port, StarCraft might start getting console ports, Diablo, well, the last Diablo did have a console port, so I guess that one technically would be on less platforms. But you get my point, right? A lot of them are very PC-centric. So really the biggest thing that they'll be taking away from PlayStation is Call of Duty. And I know that Call of Duty is like the number one best-selling game pretty much every year. But the fact of the matter is, like, PlayStation is gonna be fine without Call of Duty. They make so much money. I mean, you look at all of the projections that people have been saying, and even after this acquisition, they're still projected to make more money in gaming than Xbox. So clearly they're going to be okay. You know, they still have Spider-Man and God of War and Horizon. You know, I doubt that most of the people watching this video are playing their PlayStation so that they can play Call of Duty. Now, I understand that there's a lot of casual players who probably now will switch over to Xbox, but that doesn't mean that PlayStation is dead and that they can't compete. In fact, genuinely, I'll lay this bet down now. I don't know if I think I said this on a podcast, but at the end of this generation, I am fairly confident that Xbox will have won in America, like they will have more sales in America. PlayStation will have more sales in Japan, and the UK is kind of a toss-up, right? So those are like the three biggest markets. So if anything, we are hitting a point now where competition is going to be at an all-time high, which is a good thing. I know that it might not feel like it, but it is. And then, you know, I realize I didn't talk about Nintendo. Nintendo's going to be perfectly fine also. You know, I feel like if somebody walked up to Miyamoto, or Doug Bowser rather, and was like, Mr. Bowser, Xbox just bought Activision Blizzard, he would just be sitting on his golden money throne, and he would be like, did they buy Mario? Did they buy Zelda? Did they buy Pokemon? No? Then why are you talking to me? Like, Nintendo is barely going to notice that this acquisition happened, so everyone's gonna be fine, right? Like, if you're a PC player, nothing has changed for you except potentially what launcher you load the game up on. If you're a Nintendo player, almost nothing has changed for you. If you're a PlayStation player, you don't get Call of Duty, but like, there are so many other games you can be playing. I wouldn't worry about it. You know what I mean? And then on top of that, people have been saying like, okay, now the only way that PlayStation can compete is if they go out and they buy a publisher of their own. And it's like, okay, first of all, no, they don't. They're still doing perfectly fine. They're going to make plenty of money. Now, are they going to be looking at publishers? Are we going to see news stories of them being like, oh, they're looking at EA, they're looking at Square Enix? Absolutely. But those conversations are always happening. Even before this like acquisition season, those kind of conversations were always happening, right? Is it more possible now that they would make one of those acquisitions than they would before? Yes, if they feel pressured, they might. You know, if they want to continue to be as far ahead as they have been, then sure. But even if they don't, they will be fine, right? So they might make an acquisition. They don't necessarily need to, and I would say honestly they probably shouldn't. And I say that not because I'm an Xbox fanboy, although I have preferred my Xbox lately, so you know, maybe take it with a grain of salt if you care about console war stuff. I really don't, but if you do, I understand. The reason I say that is because PlayStation already has like a lot of debt. If you don't know, every company has what's called an operational debt, and it's basically just for really big companies. Money is very fluid, and so it comes and it goes out, and so they're always in some amount of debt to something. Xbox right now has a net operational debt of like 44 billion, but PlayStation on the other hand has a net operational debt of, I think it was like $340 billion. So it's like 6 or 7 times that of what Xbox has. And that's not to say that PlayStation is in trouble. You know, you don't have to worry about like, oh, PlayStation can't pay their bills. That's not what that means. What that does mean though is that them making a big purchase like that might just not be in their best interest, because if they want to make a big purchase like that, there's a lot of possibility that they're going to have to either take on more debt, which they definitely don't need right now, or they would have to buy it partially in shares of their company, which would also not be a good idea. Like there were some people who were being like, you know, why didn't PlayStation buy Activision Blizzard? And that's why, right? They couldn't. You know, maybe they could, but in the way that they would have had to break it down to actually get that amount of money to buy Activision Blizzard, they would have had to either take on a ton of debt. You know, $70-ish billion is a lot of money, even for these companies. That is a lot of money. And the other option is that they would have had to partially buy it in shares, when Take-Two bought Zynga, they bought it almost entirely in shares, meaning that the people who were in charge of Zynga now have some say over Take-Two. And trust me, if PlayStation had bought Activision Blizzard in that same way, none of us would want to see the people who have been in charge of Activision Blizzard have any level of control over PlayStation, right? That's not what we wanted. So I think we should all be glad that PlayStation did not buy Activision Blizzard. So all that is to say, Nintendo is going to be fine. PlayStation is going to be fine. Xbox is now just in a much more competitive space. And I think people need to understand that there's a difference between a monopoly and a potential win. You know what I mean? The second major bad take that I've been seeing going around is that either Xbox will ruin Activision Blizzard or Activision Blizzard will ruin Xbox. And let's start with the latter of that. Activision Blizzard is absolutely not going to ruin Xbox. Xbox is going to be fine. This is not like the thing I was just talking about with PlayStation, where they would have had to have bought it with like stock, meaning that Activision Blizzard would have some say over what happened at PlayStation. Xbox bought Activision Blizzard in cash, meaning that all those people on the board at Activision are gone. Well, when the deal goes through, they're gone, right? And as soon as it goes through, they're also going to get rid of Bobby Kotick. So like all of the troublemakers at the top are going to be sheared off as soon as this deal goes through. Now, the only negative that I can see is that by acquiring Activision Blizzard, it's going to make a lot more work for the people at the top at Xbox because they are tripling the number of employees, and there's going to be a lot of work that they have to do to turn around that culture. But otherwise, Xbox is going to be fine. I've also seen people be like, oh, well, they spent about $70 billion on this, which is about half of the cash on hand that Xbox has. How are they going to recover financially from this? And I think that people need to understand that cash on hand is not the same as like the amount of money that they have. Microsoft is evaluated at like several $1 trillion, right? The cash on hand is just the money that they have access to immediately, right? It's like, it's the difference it's basically a difference between like, for me, if I've got $40 in my wallet and I spend 20 of it, then I have $20 left, right? But I still have all my money in the bank that I can go and get. Like I'm gonna be okay, right? I have other ways of making money. I have a job. There's more money coming in, right? Xbox is the same way. They're going to make this money back probably faster than any of us are prepared for, and it's not exactly a drop in the hat for them. Like this is a big amount of money. But it's not enough to be like, oh, Microsoft is doomed. Like, let's all calm down. And second of all, as far as Xbox ruining Activision Blizzard, how do you think that's gonna happen? If you're one of the people saying this, okay, first of all, what do you think is there left to ruin? Call of Duty is at an all-time low in terms of sales, even though they're still number one in sales, which is crazy. World of Warcraft, people are leaving constantly and going over to Final Fantasy 14. You know, their culture is terrible. They've got strikes. They've got walkouts. They've got a major government lawsuit. What is Xbox going to do to make it worse at Activision Blizzard? If anything, they're going to come in and turn that company around and potentially literally save Activision Blizzard. Because here's the thing. If Xbox didn't buy them, somebody else would have. And it would have either been that thing where PlayStation buys them and they have to buy it in stock, and so then Activision has some level of control over PlayStation, which is terrible. Or more likely, it would have been somebody like Tencent, like Google or Amazon or Facebook. And it's like, we definitely don't want these major IPs going to any of those companies. You know, even if you don't like Xbox, which is understandable, I guess. I personally trust all the people over there right now. But it's like, it's definitely better the devil you know and who is part of the games industry and you know what they do than one of these other mega tech conglomerates that don't really do gaming and don't really understand it and probably wouldn't be able to help much, right? So I think this is the best all around. You know, they're going to turn that culture around. They've already said that they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that people feel safe and that it's an inclusive workspace, which Xbox is known for doing. They're really good at that, right? And then in terms of like for us, the gamers, this is great because they've already said that like they're going to stop having Call of Duty be annual, which means that now there's going to be all these other teams that have been kind of thrown into the Call of Duty mines who are now going to be able to do other things, right? Toys for Bob is going to be able to go back to making Crash Bandicoot or Spyro, or hell, maybe even a Banjo-Kazooie game. You know, Raven Software can start doing cool games again other than just making more Call of Duty. Like they were the people who made Star Wars Jedi Academy, which is like one of my favorite games as a kid, and they could go back to doing things like that. You know, they could spin Neversoft and Vicarious Visions back out, because those two studios were so crushed that they literally got renamed as just different studios for Activision, Treyarch, or whatever, right? So you could spin those back out, get those studios back to doing like the Tony Hawk games that Neversoft used to do or whatever, you know? They could resurrect old IP, right? They could give the StarCraft IP for a little bit to the Coalition, who's looking to do something other than Gears of War, and then we could get, you know, a Coalition level StarCraft first-person shooter or third-person shooter, and they could basically resurrect StarCraft Ghost, which I know everybody would be really excited for. You know, it's things like that. Like, what can Double Fine do with Space Quest? What can In Exile do with some of those old Sierra titles, right? Like, there are so many possibilities now that did not exist when Activision Blizzard was in control of themselves, because they had to do whatever the only thing they cared about was making the most money possible, right? And for them, that was Call of Duty. Whereas Xbox, with their subscription service, is more interested in getting content out there that appeals to a wide variety of people, which means a wide variety of different kinds of games, right? So I don't see any way in which that's a negative, especially because I feel like most people who like Call of Duty were even starting to get fatigued. Like my boss, Ryan, he used to be a former professional Call of Duty esports player, and even he's like, yeah, Call of Duty's been kind of dry the last couple of years. But now he's more excited about it because, you know, once it stops being annual, they'll have more time to spend on Call of Duty. So this will also improve Call of Duty for the people who really love that. So, you know, I saw one particular idiot online, and I'm not going to name him because that's just not what we do here, but who was like, this is bad for gamers, it's bad for devs, and it's bad for creativity. And it's literally the opposite of all of those things. Like, it's good for gamers because these games are going to go into Game Pass, which means it's extremely financially viable for more people. It also means that more games are going to be able to be made, so people who are not interested in Call of Duty might be able to have more games that they actually care about, which I would say is also good for creativity, and it's good for devs because they can go to work at Activision Blizzard and not have to worry about being harassed or whether or not somebody's going to walk into them while they're like in a you know, it's just a bad situation over there. And culturally, this turns that around. It's good for gamers, it's good for creativity, and it's good for devs, and I don't know why people think the opposite. The next one that I've been seeing a lot of is that, like, now that Xbox owns Call of Duty, they can use it as a Trojan horse to get Game Pass onto the PlayStation. And I don't necessarily think that this is a stupid take, because it's a very widespread thing that people think that Game Pass is going to wind up on PlayStation and Nintendo at some point. And it could go either way, but I personally really don't see that ever happening. Because, like, here's the deal, right? As far as I can see it, Game Pass will show up on PlayStation whenever Spider-Man and God of War show up on Xbox. Full stop, right? Xbox isn't going to put their exclusive games on a different competitor platform unless they're getting something in return, right? Be that money or be that their exclusives or something. Like, they're not just going to do that. And I know that people are probably saying, like, oh, but they can get all those extra subscribers. Here's the thing. Game Pass doesn't need PlayStation to be successful. It's already at 25 million subscribers, and with Call of Duty being added to it, it's going to shoot up. Like, as soon as that deal goes through and Call of Duty is on there forever, that's going to shoot up to 30 to 35, 50, who knows? Like, that number is going through the roof immediately, right? And the other side of it is that PlayStation doesn't need Game Pass to be successful. They have all their fantastic exclusive games that all sell really well, you know, and are very highly critically acclaimed. they're doing two very different things. And also the fact that PlayStation is creating their own streaming service, potentially the Spartacus thing, I just don't see it happening, right? Xbox doesn't need, or Game Pass doesn't need PlayStation to be successful, and PlayStation doesn't need Game Pass to be successful. So until one of those two things changes, I just don't see it happening. And the other thing is, it's kind of related to this, but it's like the stupid side of it, is people being like legitimately upset that Call of Duty is going to be in Game Pass because they're like, I don't want to have to get a subscription to Game Pass to play my Call of Duty games. And it's like, dude, then don't. Every single game that's in Game Pass is also just a game that you can buy. Game Pass is just a means of accessing a large number of games for one price. Like it's an option. You don't have to do that. If you're one of those people who only buys 2 or 3 games a year, you can still do that. They're not going to stop you. You don't even have to engage with the fact that Game Pass exists. The only thing that'll change for you is that because it's on Game Pass, more people will have access to it for cheaper, meaning that there will be more people playing the game, meaning you'll have an easier time finding lobbies. Like, this is only a positive thing. I don't get it. So another one that I've been seeing, honestly, for a long time, even before this Activision Blizzard acquisition, is that consolidation is bad. And here's the thing. I totally understand that take, right? Because if you think about it in like a really defeatist way of being like, oh, soon there's only going to be a couple of companies and Apple's going to own everything and Disney's going to own everything and Microsoft is going to own everything and there'll be no other companies that exist. And if you go down that like rabbit hole of just extreme pessimism, then I can totally understand what you're talking about. However, that's not really realistic. I know that we've been seeing a lot of acquisitions lately, and that's because it's a buyer's market. You know, it's going to sound stupid. Money is worth more now than it usually is, and people are expecting a crash in the near future, meaning that it is more valuable to spend that cash and get assets so that when that crash happens, your money doesn't depreciate, right? That's what's happening right now. That's why we're seeing all of these acquisitions happening. And the other side is acquisitions are very normal. Seeing periods of consolidation in industries is very normal. We've seen it before in the games industry. We see it in all kinds of entertainment and really just every industry, where what will happen is an industry will grow and grow and grow, and then some of the people will want to retire and they'll sell off their companies to their competitors, and then new companies spring up, and it's a cycle. It happens over and over and over again, right? And that's exactly what's happening here, right? Xbox is buying Activision Blizzard, and they bought Bethesda, and, you know, maybe somebody goes out and they buy Square, and maybe somebody else goes out and they buy Ubisoft, or maybe Ubisoft and EA, you know, merge into one, you know. But there are going to be people at those companies who separate from them and start their own new studios. And that's how that happens. You know, a big third-party studio gets bought, and that leaves a gap in the third party that other people can go in and fill, or that existing studios that don't get purchased can grow into. You know, if Activision Blizzard gets pulled out of the third-party market, then that leaves room for other studios to become larger, you know? Can IOI grow? They just opened a second studio. What happens if Team Cherry grows into being their own entire studio, or, you know, Yacht Club, or any of these like really small indies start growing? That's what happens. That's how these industries grow and change. You know, you look back to the beginning of the games industry, and like Xbox and PlayStation aren't even there. It's Atari, and it's Sega, and then it's Nintendo, right? It's a completely different landscape now than it was 30 years ago. And 30 years from now, it's going to be a completely different landscape than it is. You know what I mean? This is completely normal. And I know that it's kind of scary at the moment, but I promise you everything is going to turn out just fine. So this next one I think is probably the funniest one to me, because we have a direct comparison point and people are still in denial about it. Why are there people who still think that after this acquisition, the Activision Blizzard games are not going to be exclusive to Xbox? That is absolutely ludicrous to me. We just went through this entire conversation, guys. We can't be doing this again. When Bethesda got acquired, they couldn't specifically say that they were going to make all of the games exclusive because they didn't own it yet. They had to wait for the deal to finalize and go through all the regulations before they could say, yes, Elder Scrolls is going to be exclusive. Yes, the next Fallout is going to be exclusive, right? It's the same thing here. It's going to take even longer because this is going to take over a year for this deal to go through because it is a much bigger deal. But as soon as it's done, they're going to let you know in no uncertain terms that those games will be exclusive. They will honor all the contracts, right? Which in the case of Call of Duty, which is the big one for this, does probably mean that the next 2 or 3 years worth of Call of Duty games will stay on PlayStation, because just sort of the nature of how they make Call of Duty, where there's so many different studios working on it at the same time and that there's multiple Call of Duties in development at the same time, does mean that there's every possibility that there are multiple Call of Duty games in the work right now that are already been promised to PlayStation. And if that's the case, every single one of those will release on PlayStation. And then obviously like things like Warzone will continue to exist on PlayStation and will just adapt and, get updated. They're not going to stop supporting a game that's already on PlayStation because that's not what they do. ESO is still going to be on PlayStation. Fallout 76 is still going to be on PlayStation, right? It blows me away that there are people who are still having this conversation about like, oh, is it going to be exclusive? Is it not going to be exclusive? I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and there were people who were still like, well, we know that Starfield is going to be exclusive, but they didn't specifically say that Elder Scrolls would be exclusive, and that one has legacy on other platforms, so it might not be. And it's like, bro, they told you that Elder Scrolls was going to be exclusive. You are literally in the games industry at a high level. You should know what people are saying. The only other option is that this is denial, and I think that's just what's gonna happen again, and it's really funny, but trust me, as soon as these contracts are up, Call of Duty will be exclusive to Xbox. You do not spend $68, almost $69 billion to leave your most money-making game on your opponent's platform. It's just not done. The last take that I want to talk about that I've been seeing all over the place is that Xbox is done buying. This is their last acquisition. Absolutely not true, right? I guarantee you Xbox will acquire at least one more publisher, obviously a smaller one because Activision Blizzard was the biggest one. And for sure a handful of more small individual studios just here and there. They're going to be picking those up pretty much forever, right? If I had to guess right now, and I am planning on making an entire new video about breaking down the likelihood of every single studio now that Activision Blizzard has been acquired. But if I had to guess right now, I would say WB's high on that list, and then almost certainly a Japanese publisher, just because that's sort of the last hole in their armor is Japan. But the point being, Xbox is absolutely not done buying. So just get ready for that. So yeah, there's been a lot of things said since Xbox announced this major acquisition, and I just absolutely had to respond to some of it because not all of it, but a lot of it was some really dumb stuff, and I just wanted to get my opinion on these things out there. But let me know exactly why I'm wrong down in the comments below. Do all the things that all the YouTubers ask you to do, like, share, subscribe. We've been seeing a really great increase in subscription and just engagement numbers on the channel lately, and that makes me so happy. So thank you for that, and I'm hoping that we can continue to keep that up for the foreseeable future, because I would really love to be able to break 500 subscribers by my birthday. So thank you for everything, and until next time, I'll see you around.